Hello everyone and welcome back. In the last lesson we have finished the client part of the sign-up service. Let's now implement the server part. So we are going to go here to our server.ts file and we are going to configure here another route. We are going to use the application of Express and we are going to define here a new route that will use the URL /API/signup that we are calling from the front end. And then if the method is an HTTP post call, we're going to be creating here a new route handler. We are going to call it simply create user. So this will be a function that we are going to import here from a new file. So let's create it. We are going to call it simply create user.route. So it's a TypeScript file. And we are going to simply export here a function. And the function will be called create user. This will take the usual request and response from Express, and let's use here the type definitions of Express that we have pre-installed in order to make it easier to implement our program. So this will be the response type also from the Express module. So now with this in place, what we're going to do here is we are going to plug this function here in the definition of our server. So we are going to import it. So in order to import with WebStorm, we simply hit Alt Enter and the import is automatically added here at the top. Switching back here to the create user function, let's start its implementation by retrieving from the HTTP post body the value of the user and the password that made it through to the server. So we are going to define here a constant called credentials and we are going to assign it to the request body. So hitting here Ctrl+Shift+P, we can see that this is of type any. Having here the credentials available, what we're going to do here is we are going to call the database and we're going to save the user in the database. So let's switch over here to the implementation of our database and we are going to simply create here a new function called create user. So this will receive the email and the password, and using the email and the password we are going to be creating a new user and we will be adding it here to the database data file. So right now here we only have the list of lessons. Let's quickly create here another constant that will be the place where we add and remove users. So in future lessons we are going to have here a couple of predefined users. Right now we are going to define this as an empty object, so no users will be defined when the server gets started. And to improve here the type safety of our server, let's quickly define here a DB user type. So this will be different than the user that we have on the client side. We're going to see in a moment why. Let's simply define it. So this will correspond essentially to a record in a relational database or an object in a JSON data store. We're going to call it DB user. We are going to give it an ID, which is a number. We will also have an email, which is a string. And here is one of the differences towards the implementation that we have on the client. We are going to initially add it a password. So our initial implementation will store the password directly on the database. This is not a good idea. We are going to see why in a moment. Right now, let's simply use here the DB user type to improve the type safety of the users variable. So this will be a map. This is how we define a map. Here we are going to define the type of the key. The type of the key will be a number. And here we are going to define the value that we expect for the map. It's going to be of type DB user. So with this we will have better auto-completion for our application. Let's then switch back here to the database class and we're going to quickly implement this method. We're going to define here a counter for the number of users because we need to generate some keys. And here is what the implementation of this method will look like. We are simply going to increment the counter and create here a new ID. Given this ID, we are going to create the new user. We have everything in here that we need to create it, the ID, email and password. And we are going to be storing it in the database. And this method is going to return the newly created user. So now going back here to the implementation of our route file, we are going to be calling this new function. We are going to get back the user from this call to db create user. So let's simply import it, and here we are going to be passing in the email and the password. After creating the user in the database, let's at this point log the content of the users variable, just make sure that everything is correct, and let's build the response that we're going to send back to the client. So we are going to send the HTTP status code 200, and we're going to send back some JSON. So this will populate the content type header automatically in the response. And here we are going to pass in here the ID of the user that we will need on the front end for other operations. So we pass in user.id, and let's simply send back the email, but the password now it's at the level of the database, and we will not be sending it back to the client anymore. So again, we should not store the password directly. We're going to see a better way in a moment. Right now, this completes the initial implementation of our create user service. So let's try it out. Before doing that, let's just quickly change here one minor detail. Let's first increment here the counter using the ++ operator, and then we're going to assign it here to the ID. So this way we are sure that the counter will start at 1. So now let's start trying out this implementation of the signup service. We are going to later add extra security to it because this is just an initial implementation. Right now, we probably want to restart our backend and our frontend just in case. And with this in place, let's refresh the application and try out the creation of an user. So we are going to go here to the console, and we are going to clear here the console. We're going to create here a user. So we are just going to put in here some test email. And actually, let's go here to the terminal and put in here the console of the server so that we can see here the value being logged on the server. We're going to define here an email. The password, we are going to put the word test, and we're going to click sign up. So this should send an HTTP post to the server. We should get back a response with the data of the user created, including its ID, and here the buttons sign up and login should be replaced by the logout button. So let's try this out. If we hit sign up, we're going to see here that indeed on the server we have here the value that was being logged here at the level of the create user route. We are logging in here the value that was created on the server, and here on the console we have user created successfully, and the logout button is now present, so everything is working as expected. So we have an initial skeleton implementation of the signup service, but I don't recommend that you use such an implementation in production because there is a very big problem here. We are storing the password directly on the database. Let's then understand exactly what is the problem with this approach. How to solve that problem, we are going to introduce a couple of new cryptographic primitives. We're going to see how to use them to solve the password storage problem. This is coming right up in the next few lessons.